Welcome, everybody. This is the 2024 Hazlegrove Lecture. The first such lecture was in 98. And of course, these lectures are in honor of Paige Hazlegrove, who was basically the glass lab director at that time. And she passed away suddenly, and interestingly enough, she had invited a speaker, Peter Ivey, to come to MIT to speak about glass prior to her passing away. And he became our first lecturer in 98. And we've done them almost every year. We lost a COVID year there, as many of us did. But it's been a long list of famous glass artists speaking to us every year. Our speaker tonight is one of those famous glass artists, Ginny Ruffner. Ginny is known for lamp working, and we felt particularly interested in inviting somebody that does this flame working because it's becoming so popular amongst artists. Like many sculptors, her ideas start as drawings and then are rendered into 3 dimensions, and as you'll hear tonight, I would argue she renders them in 4 dimensions. But more on that later. Ginny hailed from Atlanta and received a BFA and MFA at the University of Georgia in '75. After not too many years, she was attracted to the Piltrex School, which brought her to Seattle, and where she taught flame working in glass. And her career blossomed from that time. And the move to Seattle really probably catalyzed that to be amongst many others working in glass at that time. She has had many solo exhibits, including Corning Museum of Glass, Renwick Gallery at the Smithsonian, many permanent collections, the Met, Detroit Museum of Art, countless awards. The 2023 Governor's Award is most recent. That's given by the Governor of the state of Washington. I was interested, there were 2 individuals last year but recognized for their contribution to the arts. And the other was Lino Tagliapietra, who's been a previous speaker here. And of course, Ginny was recognized for that. She's not surprisingly, she won the Glass Art Society Lifetime Achievement Award a few years back. So many awards to go through. These accomplishments by themselves make her an ideal Hazlegrove lecturer. But for me, just as important is the backstory around Ginny. And I think she's going to tell you a little bit about that in her talk, so I won't go into that. Although I will say it is a very strong story about overcoming adversity and continuing your art or your career or whatever it is that you want to do. So it's a very inspiring thing to hear about. Now, this is MIT, and so we're not afraid of experiments. So tonight there is a bit of an experiment in store for us. And I've asked Peter Hauck to kind of explain that before we get into Ginny's talk. But I do want to say that first, before he says anything, I want to thank Peter and all the AV team that put into a lot of time into scoping this out and figuring out how to make it work, simulcast and here at MIT, and then of course with Ginny 3,000 miles away. So, Peter.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, so originally this was just going to be a Zoom lecture. Marty, hello. We don't get to see Marty very often. But then we decided, well, why not do this as a live thing and a Zoom thing? And then it got complicated because the video people wanted to do it as a webinar, so we have a Zoom feed, and then we're going out to the world. And I don't know how many people are online, but there's quite a few people who could be watching this right now. So we couldn't get Ginny for reasons that we don't have any control over. But we got some of Ginny's things here, and I wanted to tell you about some of the things that are down. One thing we've never done before is had interactive materials for people to come and play with. So if you look at the Blackboard here, there are actually 2 projects here. A lot of Ginny's recent work has involved augmented reality. And so this bunch of blueprint-looking things here are in-progress project called The Bounty of Unpolluting. And so hopefully you have all downloaded the app. So if you haven't, that QR code there, I think you can scan it from your seats and download it, and then you'd be able to look at these. So all of the blueprints will show you this is sort of an alternative idea of carbon capture from an artist's perspective and a kind of idealist's, a fantasy perspective, but also it's informed by science, so perfect for MIT. Right now, when you view those with AR, you're going to get stills, but eventually, I think in the next few weeks, they will be animations. And then the cards that you may be able to see that are on the where the chalk usually lives down there, those are part of another project called the Reforestation of the Imagination. That was an installation at the Renwick Gallery of the Smithsonian. And I'll just let you play with those. So the idea is that there are a lot of flowers made up in the imagination that become activated when you use those targets. I want to say a word about the postcards that you all got. They're a little funny to use. You have to kind of jockey around in space to get them to work just right, but be patient with them. You might just put them on the floor and try using them on the floor if you're seated there. But if you come down here, these are actually pretty good viewing stations right here. And then the last thing I want to say is that Ginny sent out some other things, 2 catalogs, one from the Renwick show and the other from, it is the Bainbridge Island Museum retrospective show. And these are both recent shows in the last few years. If you look at this catalog here, the retrospective, you'll really get a sense of the work that Ginny has done throughout her entire career. And then there are 2 pop-up books over there that are not AR related. They're good old-fashioned analog pop-up books for kids and the kids within all of us. So I think, one last thing I wanted to say is people who are watching this on the webcast, if you want to go into settings and turn on captions, you can try to do that. It may or may not help you. Personally, I don't think it helps, but you might. So without any more, I'm going to introduce Ginny Ruffner now. Thank you, Ginny, for agreeing to give the lecture this year.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate it. Tonight, or I guess there's evening time. This evening I'm going to speak about creative problem solving on the looking and enabling that, looking and thinking that enables it. Now, I bet you've noticed that I talk funny, and I'll give you a brief rundown of why. 1991, head-on car wreck, 5 weeks in a coma, 5 months in the hospital, 5 years in a wheelchair. They told my family I was going to die. When I did, they told my family, well, she would never wake up. And when I did, they told my family that I'd never walk or talk. So you can see why I had to learn how to talk again, so I could tell them what I thought of their prognosis. But I'm telling you mainly because I want you to feel free to ask me to repeat something if you don't understand it. And I don't mind a bit. I find that what really sparks my creativity is that combination of looking and thinking, both being aware of what's right in front of your face, and then you add thinking to that. It can take you to a place where you are aware of alternative means of making art method, both media and procedures. But or it can take you to perhaps a new route to achieve that creative solution. But whatever you do, don't stop. As Albert Einstein cautioned, don't ever stop asking questions. And the way I ask questions is through painted torchwork, lampwork, flame work, whatever you want to call it, glass sculpture. But first of all, ask me, what is glass sculpture? What is lampworking? Well, and we trace it back to Bavaria in the 1400s. And the reason it's called lampworking is lampen is the German word for torch. So back in the 1400s, the itinerant lampworkers would walk around with these sort of wooden backpack dioramas on that had these examples of the tchotchkes that they could make. So lampworking and flame-working comes from a centuries-old tradition of tchotchkes. But there is notable exception right in your hometown. This is the Palacio flowers at Harvard. They were commissioned back in from 1886 to 1936 by the father and son team of Rudolph and Leopold Blaschka. They're beautiful and they still don't know how they made them. These are glass. Isn't that amazing? And they kind of died with their secrets, except for in 1972 in Corning, New York, where there are several of these specimens in the museum. There was a big flood. They got wet, and they discovered they were painted with watercolor. And that was a big revelation, but in 1915, Corning glass invented a borosilicate glass and had a really low coefficient of expansion. As you can see from the recipe there, it has a high silica content, which lowers the COE, which makes it ideal for laboratory glass because you can reheat it. It's but the unfortunate thing is that there was not a lot of beautiful stuff made with borosilicate lampworking. Actually, it's not very sophisticated, often made in carnivals and fairs. And in Atlanta, I ran across the work of this fellow who I was really impressed with what he was doing with borosilicate. It was clear and well made, colorless, but still very well made. So I talked myself into a classic 5-year European apprenticeship with Hans Godot. It was hard and repetitive, but I learned it. This was, his ring was colorless, but I realized that the reason why earlier lamplight was so boring was, or I shouldn't say that word, so unsophisticated visually, was because it was being made by scientists who, that is not the raison d'etre. And I came to it from an artist's point of view. So after I worked for 5 years, and I could finally make something, it was hard. These are some things I made. And like I said, I really used lamp working, torch working, glass sculpture to think and to opine about various things like language. On the left, it's about 24 inches tall, drawing the power of words of great beauty. On the right, it's about 16 inches wide, drawing is the language of art. And all these are painted. It's totally colorless glass, but I sandblasted it and painted it. Sorry. Another favorite topic is mathematics. On the wings of geometry, and on the right, what's really in the space between integers. Remember when you were in the 5th grade and you were learning about integers? I remember they taught me that there's infinity in between integers. I thought, oh, well, there has to be something in there. So, as an artist, the best job description is you get to make up stuff and you don't have to prove it. It's art. My research scientist friends are so jealous. I also ponder theories and inventions, evolutions. This on the left is, see, there's Adam and Eve and the serpent and the chicken crossing the road on the dinosaur's back. On the right, the invention of games. Haven't you wondered about how they evolved, how they were invented, why certain rules are the way they are? Anyway, that's the kind of thing I wonder about, and I get to make art about it. Also about origins, the debate over the origin of the planet, and on the right, the birth of caviar. I've always thought that the person who was the first person to eat caviar must have been really hungry. On some general musings, what if the ocean got its color from the fish? On the right, it's not funny, but we all know the joke. Why did the chicken cross the road? I wonder if it evolved. Wonder who started it. What format was it originally? And art itself is a constant topic. On the left is architecture and power, which is about all the diameter on the bottom is, say, 24 inches. On the right, the little painting is about 15 inches tall. I've always felt that those beautiful Dutch floral paintings look like they're leaping out of the page. So I would figure I'd just make it. But the thing about glass sculpture, as versatile as it is, it can't be scaled. I wanted to make something really big, bigger than me. But I thought, now, okay, now I gotta think and figure out how to do that, and we can't really do it out of glass per se. Well, maybe I can make large timber indoor installation composed of small parts. This one, and I'm going to tell you, there are 9 chapters, 9 different kinds of art, and I'm going to tell you the problem that they've all presented, how it's creatively solved. The problem on this one was the architect of that gallery at the Seattle Museum. This was in 2000. When I went down to the museum, they invited me to make something in this gallery. I asked them if I could hang stuff from the ceiling. They said no, the architect didn't make it structural. There's a special place in hell for architects who design museums. Anyway, I couldn't hang anything from the ceiling, but I could hang something from the Latin tracks, but only 5 pounds. I said, okay, well then I'll make 5-pound art. So what I did for this installation is the petals from 60,000 freeze-dried roses. It smelled great. I rented a commercial freeze-dryer and ran it 24/7 for 2 years. The hanging bits are styrofoam covered with rose petals, so they actually weigh less than 5 pounds. This was in 1991. And the problem with this one was sharpshooters. And what I mean by that, this is a 25-foot tornado covered with thousands of glass drops. And there were paintings and a few other glass sculptures called the possession of creativity. And was in an old museum that's directly across the street from the White House. Now the White House has sharpshooters on the roof 24/7. So this museum is so old, they don't have a loading dock. So you have to take everything in the front door. So I had to give the Secret Service a list of everything I was bringing in and a list of all my helpers who were all background checked. But ultimately, the installation, the small parts, were really the same thing, just looked a little bit different. So I thought, well, how about if I make large permanent outdoor structures? So this is an elementary school in Phoenix, Arizona. And the problem on this one was that it had to be relevant and interesting for grade school kids for years. It had to be so that the elements that you would learn had to be timeless and perennial. And it had to offer them a bit of a safe place within a really desolate playground. So I put a water fountain in the middle, and there are tile board games set in the cement, and the two girls in the foreground are sitting on a map of Arizona with the indigenous nations in different colors of tile. That problem with this was that it was a really boring existing building, and a corporation had bought the building, wanted to create a corporate gallery on the street. I also wanted there to be some kind of identifying elements that would make it look like a destination. I made these 3 18-foot long bronze wings. Well, the problem with being able to buy a building is you can also sell the building. So several years later, when it sold, they wanted to recoup their losses, so they took the wings of the building, gave them to the Tacoma Art Museum for tax deduction, and now they're on the exterior of the Tacoma Art Museum. The problem with this structure was I was hired to commemorate the donation of the couple who donated the land for the big sculpture park in downtown Seattle. So, but how would you make a structure that commemorated somebody without making a boring old statue? So I thought, well, the best way to commemorate this generosity was to create a place where you could sit down and actually regard the beauty of the sculpture park. So this is sited at the top of a hill where you can see the whole park and faces Puget Sound. And the problem with this structure was the city itself, because this was a private commission, not a public one. They really were strict about following all the rules about how close you can be to a trolley line, even though only used once a year. I should describe a little bit about this. The yellow flower spins, the blue flowers open and close, the red watering can tilts and waters down the leaf into the pot. And that window on the side, you can see the water being recirculated, pumped back up the leaf stem to the watering can. And the window on the side is for geeks like me. But I was thinking about structure, the word structure. Structure can be a noun, as in that building is beautiful. Structure, a verb. And when structuring a child's day, or structure stuff like seismic retrofitting. But what about structuring words? Well, there's the obvious one of grammar, but maybe another way to structure words, like a pop-up book. So I made a pop-up book to be the catalog for traveling sculpture shows. This one, the various pops reflect the sculpture in the show. The steel arrow is 10 feet long. And this steel trap, the bait, is a light bulb, which is a classic image represent symbol for an idea. So don't be afraid of your ideas. And the final pop is the flowering tornado. Those gold wings weigh about 400 pounds each, which is why they're lying on the floor and not hanging up. And on this one, I should tell you the problem with books in general, or writing in general. And that is, writing for me is like a DIY root canal. It's really painful, but I enjoyed making this project about the imagination, which I feel is an endless cycle, beautiful cycle. So I wanted to make them pop up a little bit different. I wanted it to be endless. So I worked with a paper engineer. It was hard to do. We worked to make this book so that when you get to the end of it, the final page, final cover, you just turn it over and go back the other way. And those are all different pops, all different pictures. And it was very difficult. But I think that writing was as hard as the engineering. But creativity and the imagination are both invisible things. They're invisible concepts that their results are visible, as is, I feel, genetics. Of course, you can see DNA just barely, but what you really see are the results, the phenotypes that are results of genetic engineering or different kinds of pairing. And I made a whole series of called aesthetic engineering about hybridizing things that don't have genes nor do they reproduce. And often they're not really things. Say, for example, horn music and blooming behavior. These are source images. Or hybridizing what might happen. Hybridizing blooming behavior and lightning. I've always wondered what lightning might look like if it has a bloom. Source images, and that piece is kind of center right, so you can see the size. Or forces. Forces are invisible. And I was thinking, what if there was a force that does shape seashells? It's hard to say, yeah. And what would it look like? What color would it be? And again, because I'm an artist, I get to make up anything I want. And there it is on the right. Or, as I was mentioning, hybridizing things that are not really things, like sheen on balls of satin. Hybridize that with a bloom, but as you can tell by now, I'm kind of a geek. And when I was invited in 2014 to a startup to see what they were working on, I went down, it was augmented reality, and I was just blown away. I came back home and changed all my studio practice. Well, of course, I was told that you can't do augmented reality on glass. I said, oh, yeah, watch me. But so I came back and I found a course to audit, and I met my great digital collaborator, Grant Kirkpatrick, who's brilliant. This is obviously the periodic table of elements is a tapestry about 10 feet by 7 feet, woven in Belgium. And it is the ultimate information technology, what you can learn just by the sheer position of the elements is fascinating. And I thought, well, I can maybe add another level with AR, so because they're such beautiful targets. This is calcium, other calcite crystals. Mm. This is carbon, which is we on Earth are all carbon-based entities. That is becomes a buckyball, which is an allotrope of carbon. The Smithsonian contacted me about making a project for them because they'd seen some of my AR work, and so we made this exhibition called Reforestation of the Imagination, imagining what might happen after the apocalypse, what things might grow back, what might evolve. I'm not such a end of the world kind of person. I think there'll be all kind of wonderful stuff happening. So these were 6 rather barren islands with colorless glass, and there were the tree rings that are painted on them are the targets for the AR. That's what's on those postcards down in front in Boston in the lecture. Now, a research facility that you are probably all familiar with is LIGO, because LIGO, the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory, is run by Caltech and MIT, and it exists in Hanford, Washington State, which is the lower right-hand image, and Livingston, Louisiana, which is the left-hand image, and Pisa, Italy, the building one in India. What it does, it measures an interferometer is not super complicated piece of equipment, but this one, the arms are 4 kilometers long, and what they're measuring is 1/10,000th the size of a proton. So there are, as the sign indicated, unique hazards. You probably all know what an interferometer does, but I'll very quickly explain. You see the number 1 down lower, slightly left of center. That's where the laser beam goes in. It hits the beam splitter at 2, and then its split goes out to the end of the L-shaped arms. Hits the mirror on the end, bounces back, and if it is not perfectly congruent, then a gravitational wave is passed through. And gravitational waves are perturbations in the fabric of space-time caused by the collision of supermassive objects like black holes. So the beam goes down, hits the mirror, bounces back. Now they're complicated. Here is one of the mirrors from LIGO point 1, the first LIGO. And the way they made it better for the second LIGO, they hung the mirrors from 4 pieces of glass thread the size of human hairs. And as the material scientists at MIT know, glass is stronger than steel under ideal conditions. Ideal conditions just never exist. So LIGO asked me to create a series of AR things that would he can give to their visitors. So that's a sailing ship and a sextant, a radio telescope, and the James Webb telescope, which are all ways we get information about time. Another element in that one was this tree of people who actually worked on the LIGO besides the 3 that won the Nobel for it. There were actually a bunch of people. This is what is down in front of you, the bounty of unpolluting. And it was originally inspired by my feeling about the idea of what happens to all that carbon after we capture it. The current thinking is, oh, let's just bury it. Well, come on, that's just, I know there are, that just is not a very smart solution. So I figured we'd just make some possible solutions. you go down front and look at those blueprints. They are rather Rube Goldbergian ways to repurpose the carbon that's captured. I am, you can probably tell by now, always interested in what's next. Metal organic framework, probably the chemical engineers are familiar with these. They are self-organizing polymers that blah blah blah. What they do is they capture a part of a molecule that comes through, for example, MOF5 in the upper left-hand corner. There's a carbon atom in there. So if you were to have air blow through a MOF, it would capture the carbon and carbon dioxide. The oxygen would just keep on going, and then it's called the gas particle. To release the gas particle, you just heat up the MOF. And I was thinking, what about if fabric was embedded with MOF that would capture the carbon out of carbon dioxide and release the oxygen, have a little pile of carbon on the windowsill the next morning or evening. And I should also mention this was discovered or actually invented by Omar Yagi at UC Berkeley. And when I showed him these, they were not too far-fetched, which pleased me. Yeah, this is a windmill that has moth-encrusted blades that during the night they gather the carbon, and during the day when the sun is up, they release water and are able to kind of make an oasis around them. Now, they have, I think like 20,000 different kind of moths. And they have been testing them by taking them to Death Valley and seeing if they can capture the moisture out of the air. Well, I'm not that kind of scientist, so I can't really explain it to you, but they have had good success with that. This is a project, another project that's not quite finished, and Grant and I have been working on, but moth-encrusted elements in the greenhouse that would make it essentially self-watering. I think the whole idea of moths is really revolutionary and is just now beginning to be explored. We still had to put some more taste. But I find that moths are enormously evocative, make me creative. And the last thing I'm going to show you, this is Project Aurora. It's a 20-foot tall, 10-foot wide, kind of a curtain thing, made of 35,000 individually addressable RGB LEDs. And you can read them run by Hyatt BC with a neural network. It's fed with images of the actual aurora. And I worked with a killer programmer to program this. He was the original programmer for Xbox, so he had great chops. We like to work together, and it's found a home, perfect home at the Nordic Museum, where the actual aurora borealis is often seen. And there it is for the front view. I hope you enjoyed this. And remember, thank you very much.
Yeah, so we can take questions live here from people in the room and also online. So maybe we can start with any questions that are here, and then I can have a chance to go and look and see if there are any online. Ginny likes answering questions, right, Ginny?
It's my favorite part. And if you don't ask me questions, I'll start asking you questions.
Oh, yep, step up to the mic.
Okay, is it on? Hi, Ginny. My name's Mark. So I'm just wondering about different pieces of art that are meant to be touched and not touched. Because, you know, some glass pieces that we see can be very fragile and not handled, but it seems like other pieces of your art you encourage to be touched and played with. So just wondering how you feel about that.
Well, it kind of depends on the medium, because often my smaller glass sculptures are painted, and so it'd be the same as inviting you to touch a painting or drawing. That would not be cool. But it kind of depends on the intention. Oh, come on, you guys, ask me something. What was your favorite part? Or what did you hate? Or what? Okay. All right. How about in that top row? So pen back go the other way. I see somebody in a red hoodie. Yep, you're right, it's him. Ask me a question. What did you like the best?
Sorry, I was curious about your a couple of slides back. You showed the piece where you had like the logs. I think it was reforestation. I was wondering about like your process, if like that was like lamp work and like how you like those look very big. I guess
Oh, yeah.
the lamp work I've seen is like much smaller stuff. So I was wondering like,
Uh-huh.
how's your process for like dealing with like those bigger objects?
Yeah, very perceptive. I made those logs during a residency at the Museum of Glass. You're right, there's no way you can let work that big. But I wanted to make something larger, so I had to go to a traditional glass studio like you have there at MIT. How about the girl sitting next to you? Yes, you.
Okay. My question is kind of silly, but you
Oh,
said you
I
put
like silly.
the Aurora Borealis art piece in a place where they already see the Aurora Borealis. Is there a reason, like, did you want them to see like the contrast between like your interpretation of it and like the real thing, or?
No, it was much more banal. They bought it. No, and that museum is actually in Seattle and in my neighborhood, which is a high concentration of Swedes and Norwegian and many Scandinavian countries. They like to live in Ballard, where I live. So the museum is there, which is kind of cool because it means that it's only, oh, say 5 blocks away from me, so I can go and visit anytime. It is kind of nice because, you know, they are kind of like your kids. That's good to live in. Okay, now I see somebody in a purple face mask. Uh-huh. Yep.
Hey, Ginny. I was curious how you designed the 3D animated uh, things that come up in the AR. How does that process work between you and the programming?
Well, it's mainly because I have such a brilliant dev guy. But the way I understand AR is that it is basically pattern recognition. Let me see if I can get him up here. Grant, can you hear me? Can you come answer a question? He's watching in another room, so I don't know if I hear me or not.
Yeah, Jenny, we have some online questions too.
Oh, good, okay,
You want me to read some to you?
sure.
Okay, well, actually, Bruce Foster came on with a
Oh,
comment saying,
good.
it was an honor to work with Ginny designing the 2 pop-up books. She is a wonderful collaborator. And then, let's see, somebody wants to know, somebody called Anonymous wants to know, how did you get interested in moths? Oh.
There he is. Now, let me answer this question, then I give it to you. So now, somebody, what was the person's name who asked about moths, Peter?
They left their name anonymous, so it's hard to know.
Oh,
Impossible.
well, I'll tell you how. One of my really good friends knows how interested I am in bizarre news stuff. And she is a friend of Omar's, Omar Yagi, who was the guy who invented them. So she's the one who told me about it. And so I've had a chance to actually talk with him, the person who invented them, to ask questions. So, Grant.
Sorry, there's a little bit of lag on the stream, so I actually don't know how long it was in between when that question was asked and I actually came out in front. Can you repeat the question?
Oh, it was, how did Ginny get interested in moths?
No, the question before that.
Oh, the question before that?
I was curious how you, how the two of you collaborate on making the 3D animations in the AR projects. Like, how does that work?
There's a tremendous amount of back and forth, and it's made easier by the fact that we have been working together for nearly a decade. A lot of it, I mean, pretty much all of it, it always starts with there's a drawing phase, as all of Ginny's work, and it is foundational in most 3D. So we'll usually sit down and talk about ideas back and forth and start sketching and go through rounds and rounds and rounds of drawings because, you know, nobody loves to do work over and over and over again, and 3D modeling is pretty time intensive. So we'll usually spend a bunch of time going back and forth and drawing and coming up with concepts. And then when we find something that resonates and lasts for long enough, I'll usually break off and go 3D model through parts of it. And sometimes that'll be me at home modeling on my own and coming back and presenting to Ginny and saying, here's where I'm at. What do you think should change? Where do you think that should go? And then sometimes we do it live in real time, which is it allows for better interfacing and better input, but is also more exhausting because it's hard to work when there's somebody right over your shoulder. No offense, Ginny.
You're over my shoulder right now.
And here's another question. This one's from someone we know, Nancy Callan,
Oh, yeah. Hi, Nancy.
who says, "You are an incredible artist. Your direction has shifted, and it seems like it's going into a more environmentally thoughtful direction. Can you talk more about that as opposed to object making?"
Well, as an object maker, I'm an object appreciator, and that will never change because I think, and bottom line, human beings are objects too. And then so we have an appreciation of objects. But beyond all that, interest in the environment is being aware of what is happening to it. I'm a big gardener, and it's obvious to me, and it breaks my heart. But it seems to be the only intelligent thing to do, to be aware of the disintegrating environment and do what you can to help ameliorate that.
Here's another online question. Somebody called DJ asking, "You mentioned several engineering challenges in your art installations. Please tell us more about the logistics of engineering in your art installations."
Well, if you make things bigger than you have to worry about them falling over and squashing somebody. And there's nothing more thrilling than installing art with a crane. I love that. But when you make things bigger, you have actually a duty, a responsibility to make sure it does not squash somebody. And so I have worked with, like, Bruce, hi Bruce, who is a fantastic paper engineer. I mean, who knew there was such a thing? So that I work with paper engineers, structural engineers, mechanical engineers. Just depends on what the project is, what kind of engineering is required. Does that answer the question?
Are there more questions from people in the room?
Another one about the AR setup. You said that it would be impossible to do AR off of glass. Oh. You said it would be impossible to do AR off of glass. What made it possible, or what were the challenges?
Well, the reason why that is so is because glass is transparent or translucent, and it has highly reflective surfaces. So a camera in your phone is pretty dumb, pretty linear. You can do one thing and do it well, but if you throw any curveballs, it gets confused and won't work. Like, for example, if you have your cell phone and you're looking at the target, if you are casting a shadow on the target, the phone gets confused and thinks the target's different and doesn't recognize it. So that's the kind of thing. But do you want to explain a little bit about how AR works?
I think you covered it pretty well, and I'm not going to bore people with a deep explanation of AR. Yeah, a lot of what we've done is trying to make AR work in subpar conditions, you know, triggering off of glass, which is reflective and poses problems, or even the triggerings for reforestation, which were on glass but painted. They were radially symmetrical, which makes pattern recognition very hard to achieve. And it's one of the challenges that I really enjoy trying to solve for, is how to make a good target for AR, which the guidelines for target making for this kind of computer recognition are straightforward but boring. How to make those aesthetically pleasing in their own right so that they blend into the artwork instead of standing out from the artwork as, you know, like a QR code looks like a very obvious inorganic thing. So I think that's all I have to say on that.
I think we have another question here, and then maybe we'll do one online after that.
Turn on the mic.
I'll have to yell. Is it coming through? Okay. Ginny, my favorite part was the flower pot with the watering can and the outdoor work, and because I love public art. So I have two questions about it. One is a piece like that will obviously change because of the weather, the time of day, and so how much you consider that beforehand or just kind of discover interesting things afterwards. And the other part is, have you ever been like looking at one of your outdoor pieces, listening to people talk about it that didn't know that the artist was standing right next to them?
Yeah, that's pretty amusing what you hear. But you're exactly right about when you design something, you have to be aware of it existing for beyond your time and in all weather, and in this particular case it had to be for all ages, all socioeconomic status, all education status, and for people who don't speak English as a first language. Those are things you have to take into consideration anytime you make work in the public.
I think we're going to have to make this one the last question, and it's Michael.
Yeah, Jenny, the one thing I'll remember from this lecture, there'll be many things, but one thing that stuck with me is your comment about hybridization of things without genes. And I was wondering if you could talk about what motivated that. And then you also mentioned you're interested in gardening, so I was wondering if there was a connection there.
Well, I'm a bit of a geek, and I guess the genetic one started when I had an exhibition in Huntsville, Alabama, and it turned out that there's a research facility there that is really in the forefront of agriculturally significant genetic modification. And that one of the docents at the museum was married to the president of that company. It's always who you know. And so I talked with her about getting a tour, and I am always good at talking my way into getting an artist in residency or something where I can come to a specific facility and make art, or at least investigate ways or things to make art about. So I went to that research facility and interviewed all the faculty about what and why they were doing the stuff they were doing. Then I came back to Seattle and found another research facility here, which I then interviewed all the scientists. And that's from those series of interviews, that's where I came up with the whole hybridization potential, which, as you know, things don't have genes, they don't reproduce. Genetics is kind of a moot point. But again, I looked at wonderful thing about being an artist. I don't have to prove anything. I can just make it up. So, and you can tell I'm really intrigued by all science.
Are you up for one more?
Sure, I love Q&A.
Okay, this is online. This is somebody, Anya Caballos Baliga, who asks, what brings you the most fulfillment in presenting your work?
Say that again.
She wants to know what brings you the most fulfillment in presenting your work.
Okay, hi, Anya. Anya is I guess she's a freshman this year at UW. And daughter of a friend who is a research scientist. Yes, what brings me the most fulfillment? That would be hard to say. If I can, because I love to think so much and I value so very much my thinking capabilities. I think if I could convey the thrill of pondering something to anyone about any subject, I just make them thrilled about thinking. That thrills me.
What a great answer. Well, Ginny, I want to thank you. All of us want to thank you. And Grant, thank you very much for all your support in this too, technical support and otherwise. Yeah.
Thank you.